You didn't click this video by accident. That doesn't mean anything dramatic or mystical. It simply means that, out of countless options, this particular line of thought crossed your attention at this moment. And attention is not random. It follows patterns. Most of the time, you scroll without registering why you stop. Something catches you before you decide to engage. A phrase feels oddly precise. A title feels quieter than the rest, not louder, not urgent, just present. And presence is often what stands out when everything else is competing for reaction. If you're here, it doesn't make you special. It makes you attentive. And there's an important difference between those two ideas that often gets overlooked. People tend to talk about awareness as if it's a trait you either have or don't have, as if it's a switch that flips at some point and suddenly everything becomes clear. But awareness doesn't work like that. It's not an event. It's a gradual shift in how you relate to what's already happening. Most of life continues exactly as it was. The same routines, the same responsibilities, the same external structure. What changes, subtly, is how much you notice while moving through it. You may have experienced this without labeling it. Moments where you realize you're watching your thoughts instead of being carried by them. Or times when reactions arrive a split second later than they used to, giving you space to see them forming. Nothing dramatic, just a small pause that wasn't there before. That pause matters more than people realize. In physics, frequency describes how often something repeats within a given period. In observation, frequency can describe how often your attention returns to the present moment instead of being pulled away by prediction, memory, or noise. When that return happens more often, perception changes not because reality changes, but because distortion decreases. This is where a lot of misunderstanding begins. People assume that increased awareness should feel exciting or empowering. In reality, it often feels quieter, sometimes even slightly uncomfortable. Because when you start observing more clearly, you also start noticing how much was previously automatic. You notice how often your mind fills silence, how quickly it judges, how frequently it looks for meaning where none is required. This isn't a failure of awareness. It's a side effect of seeing more accurately. And accuracy doesn't always feel pleasant at first. If this video resonates, it's likely not because of the words themselves, but because of the pace, the lack of pressure, the absence of instruction. When something doesn't demand anything from you, it becomes easier to stay with it. That's not coincidence. It's alignment between content and state. When someone is overstimulated, they seek intensity. When someone is becoming more observant, they seek clarity. Clarity doesn't shout. It doesn't persuade. It simply stays consistent long enough to be noticed. You may have found yourself pulling away from content that once held your attention, not because it became worse, but because your threshold changed. Faster, louder, more reactive material can begin to feel draining rather than engaging. Again, this doesn't mean you're better than anyone else. It means your nervous system is responding differently to input. This is often described as an awareness shift, but that phrase can sound more significant than it needs to be. It's less like stepping into a new world and more like adjusting the focus on a lens you were already using. The world doesn't transform. Your interpretation softens. You may notice that you're less interested in certainty, less compelled by absolute answers, more comfortable sitting with partial understanding. This is one of the clearest indicators of observation increasing. The need to conclude weakens. Curiosity strengthens. Curiosity is not the same as seeking. Seeking implies lack. Curiosity implies openness. When awareness deepens, questions don't disappear. They become quieter. They stop demanding resolution and start inviting exploration. This is why content that leaves space rather than filling every gap can feel unexpectedly satisfying. You're not being led somewhere. You're being given room to notice where you already are. If you pay attention, you might recognize small changes in how you experience time. Moments where things feel slightly slower, not externally but internally. as if you're no longer racing your own thoughts. This isn't something you force. It happens naturally when observation becomes more consistent than reaction. Consistency matters here. Not effort, not discipline, just frequency. The more often you notice yourself noticing, the more stable awareness becomes. And stability doesn't announce itself. It blends in. It becomes ordinary. That's why many people miss it. They're waiting for a signal, a confirmation, a feeling that says, this is it. But awareness doesn't provide certificates. It doesn't label itself. It simply reduces noise. And reduced noise can feel anticlimactic if you're expecting revelation. But consider this. How much of your stress came from interpretation rather than reality? How many reactions were responses to assumptions instead of facts? When awareness increases, interpretation loosens its grip. Not all at once, just enough to create space. That space is where observation lives. You might notice you're listening more than preparing to respond. Or that silence no longer feels empty. Or that you don't need to fill every moment with explanation. These are not go-all-less. They're byproducts. Nothing here is something to achieve. There's no finish line, no level to reach. That's important to understand, especially in a digital environment that constantly suggests progression, transformation, or optimization. Awareness doesn't optimize you. It clarifies what already functions, and clarity tends to simplify. If you stayed with this video this far, it's likely because nothing is pushing you forward. There's no promise waiting at the end, no instruction you're missing. Just a steady observation unfolding at its own pace. That pace matters. When information is delivered without urgency, your system has time to process instead of defend. You're not being persuaded. You're being invited to notice whether this perspective fits your experience. If it does, you stay. If it doesn't, you leave. Either response is valid. That neutrality builds trust more effectively than certainty ever could. As this continues, you may find yourself reflecting on moments from your own life where awareness quietly increased without announcement, times when your response changed before your beliefs did, or when understanding arrived without effort. Those moments weren't random, they were simply unforced. This channel exists in that same space, not to guide you somewhere, but to offer a consistent field of observation you can return to when you want clarity without pressure. If you find that valuable, you already know what to do. Subscribing isn't a commitment, and it's just a way of keeping this frequency available when you need it. And if you don't, that's fine too. Awareness doesn't require agreement. It only requires honesty. So for now, just notice where you are as this video ends. Notice the quality of your attention, not judge it, not improve it, just observe it. That's enough, and it always has been.